on Halloween night, Will saw a sort of shadow. Maybe all of this is happening for a reason.
These are not nightmares. It's happening. And it all leads back to here.
This thing.
You said it was all in his head. And what have you done? Nothing. What is wrong with my boy?
I don't understand. 11 what? She always did. It's like it's reaching into Hawkins. If anyone knows how to destroy this thing, it's Will.
Oh my God.
Don't you think it's weird how we only seem to hang out when the world's about to end?
It's not like it was before. It's grown.
It's Judgment Day. Which is why we need as much help as we can get. Is anyone there? Anyone?
You should go now. It's almost here.
You still have that bat?
Bat? What bat?
One with the nails.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the visual effects wizardry behind Stranger Things 2. Please welcome our panelists and our moderator, Mike Kanfer, Principal Strategic Development Manager at Adobe.
Hey everybody, I'm so glad you all came out for this. I think it's going to be really special. We have really worked hard to bring you some great eye candy today. It's going to be a lot of fun. But before I even introduce the panelists or start asking questions, I have a question for you guys. How many of you binge-watched Stranger Things 2 in a week or less? I kind of knew that was going to be the answer. Okay. Yeah, it's just amazing. It must feel so great to be on something that's so popular and just so iconic of today's type of filmmaking. So we have some pretty incredible people here that are just absolutely have worked really hard for many years to be at the top of their game. And we will start with Christina Graff, who I may slip and call her Xena every once in a while. And she was the senior VFX producer for Stranger Things 2. We have Paul Graff, the senior visual effects supervisor. We have Michael Maher Jr., who is the VFX designer. We have Matt Carson, the VFX editor. And we had Fred Raimondi, who was the associate VFX supervisor. So if you go through, thank you. We're going to be short on time, and we want to show you just so many things. So I'm not going to go through all the accolades and all the bios, but when you get a chance, when you go home today, take a look at the IMDb profiles of the guys to my right. It's mind-blowing how many great projects they've been a part of. So not only were the projects amazing, but we are talking about people that have won multiple Clios, Grammys, MTV Video of the Year Awards, VES Awards, and MTV Awards. So, oh, I forgot a really important one. A lot of Emmys between this crew. Thank you. You're welcome. Okay. What we're going to do is I'm going to hand it over to the panelists, and Christina's going to start. And I think it's important for you guys to understand what a monstrous task it is to put together 9-hour-long episodes of this type of content and what it really takes from the time Duffer Brothers have an idea to the time it's executed. And we're going to go through every step along the way and really show you how a workflow like this gets put together. So I'm going to hand off to Christina. She's going to tell you a little bit about the 10,000-foot overview about how you do something like this.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming, and thank you to Adobe. You've afforded us so many opportunities. You've always been good to us, and thank you for allowing us to come and
It's our pleasure.
present the work we're so proud of. And thanks to Netflix for allowing us to show all this material and for even hiring us. It was like, they're really a great company to work for, a great studio, and most of all, thanks to the Duffers for being the brainchildren from for this fantastic content. I mean, these guys don't stop. They're just full of ideas all the time. They're fun to work with. They're like encouraging, collaborative. It's just a really nice show to be on. And I thought perhaps I'll just show you a little bit of eye candy, a little more. It's just a little section of an Emmy reel that we'll be turning in for consideration. And then after that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul, and he can explain what everyone does on the team. And then we'll show you, how we start with our project, going from concept all the way to the finished project, or the finished product, the final renders. Okay, I think we're going to go to the Emmy reel now.
It worked.
That looks pretty Emmy-worthy to me.
Yeah, it's really crazy for me. We've been in this grinder for such a long time to do all of these shots, and it's always just like, oh, how are we gonna get this done? How are we gonna get this done? How are we gonna get this done? And when you just step back and look back and like, what have we done? It just blows my mind.
And you're about to do it again. You flew back
already.
special for this panel, so thank you for doing
Yeah.
it. You're beginning production on season 3.
Yes, I'm 100% unprepared for this because I'm working. So anyway, so this was just a little bit of eye candy, and for the Emmys, you need to know you can only take stuff from one episode, and we picked episode 9 because it's over 400 visual effects shots on the entire episode. Like about half of what you see went through our desks, and for us, it was the first time that we work on a show of this volume and in the driver's seat, with like over 2,000 visual effects shots all together on the production side. Usually we work with our own company, but This time we were really just on the production side, and we had a fairly small team with less than 15 people, I would say, at the production, and a significant part of it is sitting right here. And so I just wanted to take a moment to explain what everybody's doing. I'm the supervisor, basically the captain of the visual effects ship, and my job is to read the script and come up with ways that the duffers have a really nice job. They just come up with ideas, whatever gets in their mind. And then my job is to, okay, this is how we're going to shoot this, no problem. And
they
then
never throw anything hard at you, right?
Yeah, that's really kind of cool. Like, it's like my job is like no matter what they come up with, we'll figure out a way to do it. And then we'll try to make no mistakes when we shoot it and get it all shot together, which is a hard job in itself, but when you multiply that by whatever, like 2,000 shots and what is in every episode, it was mind-boggling. And the next person is Christina. She's my wife, but she also happens to be the second most important person in the team, and she's the producer, navigates the ship, makes sure everything gets there in time. It's like the scheduling was like the hardest problem we had, and on top, she was in the boat and on the table with any creative decision that was made. So.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Michael, who's our concept artist, and you'll see what I do as I'm basically, mothering everything from start to finish. And as we go, we'll take this journey somewhat chronologically, so you can see where we start, and then you'll see the final shot.
My name is Michael, and I draw pretty pictures. That's just about it. No, I'm so happy to be up here, so lucky to be on this show. It's a dream come true. So basically we start with the script, obviously, the written word, and sometimes it'll be a sentence. And then I get to take that sentence and think, what would be cool? And then pitch that, and usually it's like, that's not cool, try it again. And so I have to draw it over again. No, but like it's a great thing to be able to visualize this show because the content is so fun. So usually we start with storyboards, and then we can do, fleshed out concepts that are nice and colorful and lit. And then in the end, when it's more into the post-production, then I take care of paint overs and just help a little bit with visual direction. So
in other words, you're pretty good with Photoshop.
I use it just about every day. So that's, I use a variety of programs, including Cinema and ZBrush, but it really all focuses back through Photoshop for the final product, and we'll see some of that in a little bit, I'm sure.
And this is Matt Carson.
So I was the VFX editor. VFX editor has a few jobs, but essentially it's being the middleman between VFX production or the vendors and editorial. So as the editors and directors are cutting the episodes, I go ahead and convey what shots have been added, trimmed, any specific notes that they want to pass along to the vendors, and really communicate with all these guys. And one of the great things that made my life so much easier on this show was, the communication between everyone, and that's my main job, was flawless. It was like a well-oiled, intricate machine where everyone kind of did their parts, and by the end of the show, it was flawless. So it made my life a lot easier. And then one of the other jobs that I had to do was go ahead and temp, in Stranger Things, where you're dealing with a lot of CG creatures and everything, we've got to find a way to go ahead and figure out like the blocking and stuff for the cuts. And we'll discuss that shortly when we get further along.
Believe it or not, Demogorgons aren't real, so we had to create those.
We had one in the office, though.
Oh, yeah.
That is true.
His name was Clyde. My name is Fred Ramondi. I was the associate visual effects supervisor and in-house compositor on the show, and I comped something like 150 shots that actually made it to the screen that were final comps, all done in-house. And then, in addition to that, worked really closely with of course, with Paul and Michael and Matt and the Duffers to do what we call post-viz, which was stuff that was, like for instance, the Shadow Man was shot. They shot the plate and then it had to be back animated into the shot. And basically, Michael made a model, handed it off to me. We'll see this stuff later on, but then I actually animated and comped the shots in Adobe After Effects, and then would hand it off to editorial. They would cut it in, and if it worked, great. If not, get kicked back. We would do it again, and back and forth and back and forth. And the great thing was we were all under one roof in one, we had a VFX editorial, and at the end of the show, these two guys were back from Atlanta. I was holding down the fort in LA, and we would be able to go very quickly. We would be able to iterate very quickly on the as you know, what we do is an iterative process. So we were able to go back and forth very quickly and get to, what the final picture was, and then hand that off to the vendors so that there was no doubt as to what they were going to be doing to make the final shot.
So I found it interesting in our conversations, because we were just talking about how this all comes together, that you're using the Adobe tools in a bunch of different ways. You're using it, in the most absolutely creative way to literally draw from a blank canvas to, on your side of it, you finished hundreds of shots doing it. These were shots that are literally cut as they are finished into the movie. But there's a huge piece of the way Paul and the team use the tools. It's almost like, it's like your Swiss Army knife, whether it's figuring out a color management pipeline, or figuring out lens distortion, or figuring out the size of a camera's sensor. It's sort of like this toolkit that you found, all these really innovative ways to.
Yeah, it's a little bit like my name is Paul Graf. I speak German, English, and After Effects. And and it's like, it's true. I mean, there's like one thing is with the camera, like what we always wanted for visual effects is that we shoot everything with an extra padding. So in season 1, where we were not part of, they were reduced everything from 6K to 5K, and which resulted in a 4K padding of every frame, and then the typical Netflix 2:1 aspect ratio. And now we get a new camera, we're going to 8K, and I had to figure out how to translate that same pattern into the new camera. And we provided the whole basics for the camera department in the show, and it was all kind of like figured out on my desk in After Effects.
And although it's a lot of work that in a normal pipeline, it's not necessarily your responsibility. I think you were saying that you love the degree of control because you are able to keep everything under that one umbrella and keep an eye on it, and you roll your sleeves up and use the tools. And rather than ask different departments, take this concept, do this part A, then do part B, then do part C, it takes a while to communicate that to different departments, whereas you guys have enough knowledge of the tools to whip something up together, and you could say to the Duffer Brothers, hey, come over here for a second, take a look at this, and get an approval so much quicker than normally the way that's done with a director approval. So.
Well, I love my pixels. I'm a compositor. I love pixels. I want to know what's there and how it goes.
Compositor.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting with like all of this monster job. My favorite moments were sitting down and doing shots. Like I did like a handful of shots.
There are shows where the producer will literally say to the VFX soup, "You are not doing shots. We cannot have you spend your time." She doesn't say that to you. I know.
No. This was different. I mean. First of all, like, the mantras, be prepared, always be prepared, like, even for those things you're not prepared for, like, think ahead, right? So we did a lot of prep work. Paul and I started the show, I can't vouch for this, but I think we were two of the first people that were hired, even pre-production.
Oh, that's a really cool story.
Yeah, so we started just basically just meeting with the Duffers and just brainstorming and decided that the best thing we needed to do was just already start like growing an in-house team and getting concepts prepared and seeing what the Shadow Monster and the Demogorgons all look like, the 5 different stages of development for those, which I'd love to, for Paul to explain to you. I have some.
Yeah, why don't we take a look
at a few things to show you.
So
Can we switch?
Let me
mics
just
over here?
just give me 1 minute to explain how this whole thing started because it's a cool story. We get a phone call. It's August 2016. We're like kind of gearing up for a movie that we were pretty much going to do, and we get a phone call. Yeah, can you come and would you be available maybe to do Stranger Things? And we're like, Stranger Things, sure. Never heard of it, but. And then we watched it. My sister was visiting, and we watched it at our house, and we were like floored. We're like, this is the coolest thing. And so we're going to a meeting with the Duffers in Hollywood, drove up with a motorcycle somewhere on the hill, and we got off the motorcycle, and there's these two guys, and we said, are you guys the Duffer Brothers?
Are you the Duffer Brothers?
Yeah, they were the Duffer Brothers. Then we had a meeting. It went really well. They really wanted us to be on the show, and it was like, this year is going to be much bigger in terms of visual effects than last year. And so we have two things to begin with. That is the Demogorgons. We now have the Demagogue. We want to show the development of the Demogorgons and the Shadow Man. It was called the Shadow Man or the Shadow Monster, a Lovecraftian, shadowy thing. And then we got into, basically got the boat right in the water and started developing. Like what you just saw there was Steve Messing's early concept of the Shadow Monster. Looks already pretty much like what it looks like in the show. Yeah. And that's also, Steve Messing is like one of the people we've worked with forever. He comes from the school of the most accomplished matte painters in the world and worked with us, and of course is also Cinema 4D, After Effects, Photoshop artist. So these are like some early ideas of like what that shadow monster could look like. Then the other thing was the Demogorgon, and so we see the Duffer's idea was like they wanted to basically go through 4 previous stages. What you see in the center right is the season 1 adult Demogorgon, and we had to come up with like an evolution from a polywalk style thing to a cat-sized thing to a dog-sized thing, and that was going to be the one that wreaks havoc in our season. So we were never going to make it to the adult one, but we started with the small one, and we went back to a company called Ernst Sims Creative, who did the CG version of the Demogorgon in season 1. The Duffers were really happy with him, and we went through a few stages, and here you see like a final version from ASC, also Photoshop, of that creature. And then we went shopping for the correct vendor for this, and we felt Hydraulics was going to do a good job, both with Shadow Man and the polywalks. And here you see the final sort of test of this motion design for what this little polywalk was going to look like, and we brought this to set, and everybody was like ecstatic, like totally ecstatic.
We had to find ways to make this polywog in the first 2 stages, the tadpole stage, and then the Frogagorgon, we called it. So make it cute, right?
Yeah,
how does it emote and how does it move? So we decided, okay, we're going to make it clumsy and kind of slippery and let me show you the
next one.
I'm fumbling a little bit to get these things out to you guys, but oops, sorry, what happened there?
A little feedback there.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do this. Yeah, this is our Frogagorgon.
Yeah, the Frogagorgon or Toadagorgon, and we wanted to see.
Is there a naming department for these things?
Huh?
A naming department?
Well, no, we started with Frogagorgon, Toadagorgon, Catagorgon, Dogagorgon.
According to their size.
And then, according to their size.
Yeah.
And then the Duffers changed it around from Dogagorgon to Demagogue, which is essentially...
It's going to be really big by the time you get to season 10.
Yeah. So this was also, like what you saw there, is like this has a translucent neck, and you have organs inside that you can see through. There's like... This was the first motion test, and we really loved the little limp that he has. So we put like really cute music under it and showed it to the Duffers. They were pretty happy with it.
Played it to the Sanford
and
soundtrack.
This is really early, and then there's a more, like this is like a few weeks later. This is like already pretty close to the final design.
Yeah,
that's in the show.
Look how cute he is. He doesn't even have eyes or anything. It's just, whoa.
It's really amazing how it's integrated with the light.
Yeah.
Pretty good job on it. The translucent.
Yeah, hydraulics did a great job. Like
subsurface scattering.
It's in there. Yeah, exactly. It's in their studio, and then we have the category and the one that needs news.
Yeah.
And I remember when we read the script, everybody was like, "Ay, ay, ay," you know, if that's not too cruel, what we do with that cat. But the Duffers were really firm on that.
So we had to, I mean, they rigged it and took the model from Aaron Sims' company or Aaron Sims Creative, rigged it, lit it, you know, and so we've turned this into our motion test, which eventually we gave to Matt, which we'll show you soon. I just want to show you the Dog-a-Gorgon. This is our mean Dog-a-Gorgon.
And I mean, you see, like, basically is you have written words, and you have to turn those written words into physical images, and that's really before you can shoot, you need to have an idea of what things are going to look like, and that's really where my literal creative right hand, Michael Maher, comes into the game, because we hired him to be able to communicate ideas with the Duffers, and it like ballooned from having something visualized to literally having everything that we could ever think of visualized wonderfully, not only visualized, but storytelling with storyboards to an extent that we had a lot of money packed away for pre-visualizations of scene, and the storyboards that he did were so amazing and completely based on geometry, on actual geometry in Cinema 4D, like go to the set and like measure out the set and build the set, and then use actual cameras and have little stand-ins for figures, and then draw like something that looks like a storyboard, but it's actually a three-dimensional correct image shot through a lens. So
Michael came on in pre-production as well, worked with us directly. Should we show you a reel?
Yeah. I'll just do a little setup here. So basically this is a bunch of still images that I cut together in a little motion reel, and they're mostly concepts, but you'll see some that are in sequence, and those are kind of like the storyboards that we were just talking about. So you can go ahead and cue it, and I'll just talk over some of these images.
We might need to turn the sound down.
So most of this stuff, the Demogorgon and the Mind Flayer was already designed. So I just got to play with them in the context of how do we put them into shots and make them look interesting and fun. Beware of spoilers. So much of this is just Adobe Photoshop, Cinema 4D, and ZBrush. And you know, we're just coming up with images to sell the Duffers, you know, with the Mind Flayer and an L going through the upside down in episode 2. And then here we have the Demogorgons emerging from the hole. So those are actually storyboards that I did. So I rigged all the Demogorgons and had them running around the hallways and eating scientists. And each one of these we would just present. Poor Bob.
So we'd go through the concept, storyboard process, get all this approved, present it to the Duffers.
Right.
And give it to the rest of the crew for.
A lot of these I would do like in a little sequence too, so we could see step A, step B, like here for example for Poor Will. We would show, you know, stages for each thing, so they could see how it would develop in the shot. And I used Photoshop's animation actually. For this is a good example. I drew, you know, the Mind Flayer in several different iterations and then just animated it right in Photoshop. And this was just concepts informing Chapter 9 with what happens with Will, Hopper in the tunnels. Did I say I drew pretty pictures? Sometimes they're gross. I'm sorry about that. So this is some of my favorite stuff because it didn't make it into the show, but we had some alternative designs to some things, and you know, just throwing ideas out at the Duffers and seeing what stuck. And unfortunately, none of this stuff did, but that's my favorite stuff to show.
That's awesome. I just wanted to elaborate on something that Paul touched on, because typically there's a concept illustrator, and whatever the tool it is, whether it's markers or paint or Photoshop, you're just making a drawing, and that's the illustration, the concept. But because of your knowledge of the tools and how you're able to bring in Cinema 4D and After Effects to it, you are coming up with not only a visual Bible for the production, but giving them a lot of information about camera placement and lighting that is useful in those other departments. So this is really, what I'm feeling here is between the different ways that you approach this, there's a lot of efficiencies at work. And I think a big part of that too is the way Matt can work with you guys and start timing out the sequences. I didn't know if you're getting to that next.
Yeah, I think we'll get to that next. Yeah, I mean, what Michael's done is basically, so we know what it is that we're shooting, works with Paul and collectively with the Duffers, and then figures out, what is it we're going to shoot, and then we'll shoot it. We'll have to be super prepared, and then gets to editorial, and then we give it over to Matt.
Would just like to say, like, what you just seen is like about 75% from Michael is before anything was shot. Before we know what the set's going to look like, or we go to art department, maybe it's not even finished painting, and it's like before we shoot, we know this is like what Bob looks like when he's on the ground with the Demagogue and the Gorgons on it, and some of them were also paint overs, like later when some footage has been acquired and you want to know like what it looks like when the tendrils go into Will's mouth. But what was really mind-blowing was, especially towards the end, when we did the whole scene in the shaft of chapter 9, where we were basically alone with the shark cage and like 3 panels of blue screen and a few lights, and for 1.5 days, we just shot this whole scene that was invisible to anybody. And those storyboards, Michael made like 150 storyboards for 105 shots and setups, and they were like lined up on the walls, and we had like 3 panels of walls full of storyboards, and then we were like crossing them off, and then everybody was like, "You guys are crazy! Like, this is impossible. This can't be done." And then we were like, "Wait." We turned the panels around, and there's just as many on the other side.
It's true.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, just wanted to. And you look at the storyboards, and you can look at them like a little flip book, and it's literally chapter 9. Like, it's like almost 1-to-1 what is in the final episode. So let's hand it over to
Matt.
Perfect.
Matt.
So, as I was kind of saying earlier, one of my jobs is really tracking shots, and that's the tedious part. But the fun part is being able to go in and really temp the shots and kind of get the blocking and the timings, for the editors and the directors to kind of figure out their sequence.
Explain that. It's tracking through the system.
Tracking,
not motion tracking.
So not motion tracking. Essentially, it's figuring out what shots are going to be VFX shots and flagging those to the vendors and saying, okay, this is a shot where we need to add a CG dart, or this is a Shadow Man shot, and going from there. But the fun part is temping. And what we're going to show right here is I was able to use some of those early on pre-production CG concepts and get an alpha channel from one of the VFX vendors. And using After Effects, I was able to go ahead and manipulate the alpha channel, speeding up the dart and kind of comping them into the scene. So that way the editors and directors could go ahead and kind of get the timing of that scene and figure out, okay, rather than turning over a 200 frame plate, we only need to turn over a 40 frame plate, and getting it really precise for what they need to work on. And even going back into Michael's, the storyboards and stuff like that, being able to use the storyboards to illustrate what something is going to look like in the 209 Rift, everything was on blue screen, so you couldn't really see what the background was. We were able to go ahead and temp in some of those concepts. You can kind of get an idea of like, oh, the Shadow Man's arms coming out, and it really helps just kind of figure out the progression of the editing sequences, and it's a lot of fun. And Fred helped a lot on a lot of that stuff, which we'll see here, and I'll let him talk about this.
So in addition to doing the final comps, which is stuff that actually made it into the show, I mean, for me, one of the most fun things was being able to pull in all the things in my toolkit, because I'm a pretty good animator, so I like to animate, and I know Cinema 4D, and I'm a pretty good compositor, so I was able to comp, and I was an editor at one point, so I could pull in all these tools to be able to actually craft a sequence. And when the Shadow Man confronts Will at the school, you know, basically they were empty plates of the school, and some of them were reverses with Will behind, you know, with the camera behind Will, and we were supposed to see the Shadow Man behind him. And one of the things that was really wonderful about working with this specific team was that because Michael Maher was such an amazing concept artist, but also had great Cinema 4D and After Effects chops, he was able to hand off to me a rigged Shadow Man, at which then I was able to light, integrate into the scene, do some basic camera tracking of the scene. I was able to light it, integrate, and then animate it into the scene over a sequence. And then, so we would have a really good idea of what the Shadow Man was actually looking like when he was confronting Will, and also what Will was looking like as he was being confronted by the Shadow Man. So, you know, all the shots in this sequence that you're seeing here, they all ran through me basically to do, and these are all temps. Like for instance, with the Will stuff right here, I did a crappy rotoscope of him, and you can see the particles. I did the particles in particular, and because I love particle systems as well, so they're like my favorite CG toy. So I was able to do that, and then animated the Shadow Man into the scenes, and basically I would do them on a shot-by-shot basis. I would do them one at a time, also keeping in mind how the sequence was supposed to work, and then hand it back to Matt. Matt would look at it, drop it into the show, then send that back to editorial. Editorial would look at it and go, that works or it doesn't work, and then send it back to me. And the great thing was we were right down the hall from each other, so this was all happening. Sometimes I would do 2, 3, 4 iterations of a shot in a day because we were able to communicate so quickly. So, and also having those tools, like being able to kick stuff out of Cinema 4D quickly, and I had a separate machine which I was just rendering on, and then being able to do, you know, the comp in After Effects and take it from there, and it went really fast, and it allowed us to get to that final, what the story was actually going to convey very, very quickly. And then in addition to doing those temps, one of the things was, since I like to animate, when they handed this particular sequence off to me, I thought originally, I think the book was going to be done by one of the vendors, and I said, no, let me try to do the book in Cinema 4D. I'll animate it, I'll render it. And
the sequence where 11 throws it.
Where 11, and where Hopper literally throws the book at 11. That's this particular scene here that you're watching. So basically, one of the cool things that on this show was Paul and Zena and the team down in Atlanta did like amazing amounts of data acquisition. So for instance, when it came time for me to make the book in Cinema 4D, basically I went to the file of, we had a server, and boom, there was 50 or 60 raw files of the book. I was like, that one, that one, that one, that one. Then retextured the book in Photoshop, doing all the UV mapping and all that stuff, textured the book, and then basically animated it back into the scene. And we had a finished scene, and it allowed me to do stuff, do all the animation as well, like the pulling back of the book. Like eventually, that was something that wasn't actually in the script. Like when she throws the book, the rearing back, that was something that I decided, it would be cool to see the book come back and then be thrown. So that kind of stuff was really fun for me, to be able to do the shot essentially from beginning to end was a really lovely thing. And once again, between Photoshop and After Effects and Cinema 4D, like it really kicked. I was just like, boom, 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 let's go. And then
all you guys use all of those tools all the time. Yeah.
Well, it helped a lot because, I mean, just thinking about like in a CG world or CG creatures, you're constantly changing the edits, and that costs a lot of money. But being able to do these temps, I mean, with Fred being able to go ahead and do the Shadow Man and stuff, that cut changed a few frames here or there, and it made the process just so much easier and efficient to get that work done with the tight schedule that we already had. So being able to get stuff like this, it really helped in the progression of the story and everything.
For the temp.
Well, it also helped because the vendors knew exactly what the timing is. They knew exactly what they needed, like what the motion's going to be. Simulations are extremely time-consuming and expensive. So.
And you say it somewhat
exactly
matter-of-factly, but if you think about how much time and money can be wasted when a vendor doesn't really have enough direction, and you're putting certain things into their hands that sometimes will work out, sometimes doesn't. It seemed like you really had a great roadmap. These were very polished temps. They weren't just things that were quickly slapped together.
No, that's what Paul's kind of known
huge
for.
efficiency
prepared.
to that.
We were never really sure that it was physically possible to pull this off. Honestly, just the volume that we had and the difficulty level, and we have a good name. We knew it has to be great, it has to be seamless. And and then things started because the Duffers are not only the directors, they're also the writers, and so they've been basically working 24/7, and even with them working 24/7. You're waiting you get an outline, then you get a script. Sometimes you get the script 2 weeks before you start shooting. The production schedule went 2 months long or 3 months long. We were originally supposed to be finishing in March, and we ended up finishing in June. And we had all of that time went out of the post-production because we had a fixed deadline at the end. So it was crazy, it was just crazy tight. And it got tighter and tighter, and it got bigger and bigger at the same time. Every episode we figured out, well, let's do it one step at a time. And at some point came to a point where it's one step at a time doesn't work. We have to do all steps simultaneously.
Now. Yeah. Do you want to talk about the drone? Because that was kind of fun. That's a good story.
So we had a really nice shot here that Fred comped. Why don't you start with that, and then I'll take it over, because it's kind of a cool story.
You want to talk about the top-down?
Yeah, let's do the top-down.
So this particular shot was shot by Paul. He decided he wanted to try his hand at doing drone photography. So he went out and bought a drone and started doing drone photography. And so he started to come up with all these cool shots. And this particular shot, we called the top down. And basically, it looks very simple, but if you were to look at the original plate of this, which Zena's going to show you now, I'll show you just how much actually went into making this shot. So if you look at this roof as it pulls back, you'll see there's all this garbage on the right-hand side. There's cell phone towers that you can't see. There's the fans aren't moving. There's stuff in the parking lot on the left and the right. There's handicap parking, which was not even a federal requirement in the 80s. So we had to make sure that it was really true to the time. So Steve Messing, who was one of our matte painters and also an amazing, I don't know anyone that knows how to integrate Photoshop and matte painting and Cinema 4D better than him. What he does is truly magic. Would hand me basically off a Cinema 4D file with the antennas and all the paint outs for the roof. So it was essentially a dynamic matte painting that was projected in Cinema 4D. He would hand that off to me, and then basically, because I had Cinema 4D on my machine, I would do a render, and I would render it out the way that I needed it to comp it, and then comp it together. And then as we were going into it, stuff like the fans, I cut out and animated by hand in After Effects, did those in 2D, and I can't tell you how many times Paul and I went back and forth on the top fan. Should it strobe? Should it not strobe? I probably did that top fan 30 times. No, probably only about 17.
Okay, so let's tell a drone story, because it's every time you have a job or do a project, I feel okay, it's time for some kind of goodie. Let's spend some money on some toy, right? And so let's not play that yet, quite yet. So This time it was like we had to put Harkin's lab into an environment, and the thing is, this lab is actually like in the middle of a city, on a university campus, and we needed to put it onto a lake. And so I was Google scouting like locations where this could maybe work. And the plan was like we shoot some kind of like helicopter drone plate of like a forest with maybe a lake or like a field in it, and then we put Harkin's lab in there. And in order to build Harkin's lab proper, I figured, well, I'm gonna buy a drone, and then I can do scouting. I can go and scout like a really cool place where we shoot it, and I can take high resolution imagery of the lab and just fly around it and take textures all around. And that's what I did. This was my second day playing with this drone, and after I had all my high resolution texture. And I was like, okay, so now for the fun part, let's explore some possible angles. So maybe we can come back and I can show it to the duffers, and I could say, well, if you come from there, this is kind of roughly what you would see. Maybe we can go there with a professional crew and shoot that, or maybe this is what it looks like from here. And this is running at it's much longer, so we're running it at like 5 times speed. And but you can see kind of like what the problem is. That all of this has to go. We have to be in a field and
Forest.
in a forest, and not in close to a city. And all of these, it turns out, the editorial kind of decided, we don't like the drone team shots. We like these shots. Please turn them all into actual shots in the movie.
We spent like an entire Saturday going through this footage and having the duffers and editors selecting, okay, which ones do we want to use? And like every single shot was one of Paul's drone shots, and was selected. We're like, all right, we're going full steam ahead.
Yeah, and this was just like exploring. I just wanted to know what that thing looks like from the top, and I'm like I went down as far as I could, where I could still see that drone somehow above the roof, and it was really cool. And then we had no money. Next thing is like, okay, so we don't really have money to make all of these environment shots, so we have to do them ourselves. And that was in our company, our like bread and butter was like Cinema 4D, After Effects, environment shots. So we did all of these in-house, all of the drone shots, all the background replacements, and some of them were like, you see, because when I went there, it wasn't set up for us. It was just Sunday afternoon. And there's like production vehicles parked and like all of this stuff, so that all had to be painted out. And this is actually kind of interesting. So this is about getting rid of the forest, and you see basically, this is an After Effects comp. No, it's a Photoshop file, I'm sorry. You see background plates, there's like 3 different frames from the beginning and to the end. The top one is an actual frame, and the other ones are projected back so they tie with the other frames. So you basically have the entire environment. I know that's what's seen through the shot. And then I'm just starting basically turning it in a log Photoshop file. And then I start painting out with healing brush really quickly. It takes a half hour, and paint out the entire forest. No more forest. That's before and after. With the LUT on the top, you can see the color lookup table, and that's all that's really done. And then that gets back and mapped back onto a surface and basically tracked in the shot, and you could not tell. Like you're just looking at a clone stamp picture.
And they weren't non-trivial shots. Every one of these drone shots was 500 to 1,000 frames. So they were long. Most of them were establishers, so they were really long shots. So there was a lot. Anything that we had to do in there, it had to hold up, because people were, all our work had to hold up, but it had to really be bulletproof for 800, 900, sometimes 1,000, 1,200 frames. So that's a lot. That's a lot of screen time for any of you that.
Okay.
Well, and then here, this is actually really interesting. I tried to figure out, so what is the lens, what's the film back, what is the actual lens and field of view, which you need really to track and build geometry for these shots, and it's not available. So we basically reverse engineered from the luckily our object that we had is very geometrical, and it allows to figure out what the perspective of the shot is, and then we basically reverse engineered here in a combination between After Effects and Synthesize what the film back is and what the lens is. It turns out, I think it was an 8mm lens and a 12.2mm film.
Right, because typically, like with a Red camera and Alexa,
you look that up.
Sensor is a known size. You look it up on a chart. It's got all your data. on this, you just had to backwind it and figure it out, which is,
exactly. And then here we have one more of those drone shots that doesn't look like much, but it's actually particularly hairy because there were cars parked on the left side. It was an old parking lot that had to go, and there's layers of trees and branches on top of it. So that whole left side is reconstructed, also from a matte painting, and all the buildings are cloned out of the background. And this is actually not a Cinema 4D render at all. This is a full 2.5D After Effects comp. Actually it's only it's built, the antennas are built in Cinema, but the actual shot, like everything that's moving, is just After Effects.
Yeah. And we have, and we have good stories about the closing shot. Yeah. Matt, do you think I should show, just about as far as like temping things in? Is there anything I could?
We could show. I mean, just so they can go and see maybe the junkyard or something like that. Could be kind of fun.
Yeah. Okay. Let me go over there, you guys. Give me a second.
How are we doing with time?
We're doing great.
Are we? Okay. Good.
Yeah.
So again, this is kind of going into the Dart and Terrarium. Being able to take those CG reference concepts, what we're going to see in the junkyard in a second,
if I can find
is being able to put the stage 3 Demagogue essentially into and temping, so that way the editors and directors could go ahead and get the timing and reference for, which we'll show you in just a second.
And that was a long
There we go.
And that was a long sequence, yeah. So being able to go ahead, essentially like the editors would tell me, okay, we want the Demagogue to jump here, or we want it to come out of the fog here. So like for this, there was an exact timing for a music cue where we needed to see the Demagogue walk out of the fog. So we would get that rough comp in and everything. And then as the sequence progressed, there are moments where, okay, he's going to be sitting here, he roars at a certain point, and luckily with the reference pass, which I don't think we were able to show, but the actual CG reference pass that they went ahead and did with hydraulics, we saw the Demagogue open its mouth and roar, and I was able to manipulate that in order to fit into this sequence timing here. And then he attacks, and we'll watch that for a second. So these were just some reference, just still frames that I was able to use in, just because we didn't have the back of the Demagogue on the CG pass. I think we even used some skeletal frames, which I think Michael had created right here, just to see them jumping into the car. So we use kind of like whatever you can get your hands on. I think there was at one point we had like a baloney dart or something, like some creation. It was like the most awkward, funny looking thing ever. But then we went ahead and actually temped the real thing in, and that's when like the studio or Netflix would go ahead and take a look at it and everything.
Yeah, there was another thing on this junkyard scene. Somehow, in the heat of the battle, we forgot, or production forgot, to shoot the reverse angle looking back from the bus.
Yes.
And I think it was original. They thought that we don't need those, but the duffers were like, that's the thing is with show duffers, they get to decide, and they were like, no, we need angles, so we need to look back there. This is one. So this, and it turns out we did not have this plate. We had what we did have was a few ball passes of like our one of our guys, like Taylor, walking with the ball, silver ball for the Demagogues. But it was about the approach coming towards us, so the focus was always close. We didn't have deep focus on those plates for this shot, and then we basically scrambled together from like high angles in Photoshop and After Effects, basically cloned like this entire environment is like artificial, made from individual cleaned up frames and with paint outs of ball pass guy and like all kinds of stuff. Like maybe Michael, you want to talk about this for a sec?
Yeah, just really quickly. So there's a different plate that we basically cut out all of our cars and rearranged them and put everything in focus, including even the trees in the background, those metal plates, that yellow truck, the blue truck on the side. So we were really just like taking whatever we could and putting it into the shot, and we were really happy with just kind of Frankensteining together the plate, how it came out.
And once again, I mean, they Paul and Zena, like, and the Atlanta crew, they did so much data acquisition. This is the ball pass, which is basically used for CG to light it and what have you. All that data acquisition that they did paid huge dividends for us. Like, in this case, it gave us a shot that we didn't have. So it's really, all that prep and all that data acquisition really, the more you have when you get back to finally finish the shot, it pays huge dividends. I mean, you did LiDAR scans of what? Of everything. It was always, like, we would be in a CineSync with the vendors, and they would be like, well, we have to build a model of blah, 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 and Paul would go, oh, we have a LiDAR scan of that.
Yeah.
So
well, it was, at first, they were like rolling their eyes every time. It's like, okay, what do you need? Like HDR eyes? And then after a while, it was like, balls, and like everybody, okay, let's do ball pass. They were really having fun with it.
So maybe just for the audience, explain a little bit more how that information of the reflection of the environment on that ball is used by the CG artist.
Yeah, this ball is actually, it has two sides. One is gray and one is silver. And what is like just a characteristic of a silver ball is that you can it reflects actually 180 degrees. The entire environment is on that little ball, and it shows exactly where the light is and how strong it is. And what you can do is you can make a CG ball and put it in the scene and light it with the HDRI information from the set, from the same location. And you should be able to make a ball that sits right next to this ball and looks exactly the same. And you can
zoom. So you captured the lighting to match it in the CG.
That's right. And so basically what they do is like take a gray ball and a silver ball and like run it through the CG pipeline, and it needs to look exactly like the one on set. And then we know, okay, so if we run anything else through that same pipeline, then whatever else we put in there, say a Demagogue, should be lit exactly right for this scene.
Yeah, and
this is essential.
Anytime that I'm turning over these shots, the vendors, with the help of coordinators and all of the kind of asset, kind of what they noted on production, I would make sure that the vendors would get all the clean plates, the ball passes, the reference passes, essentially everything that you could possibly take to composite the shot as well as they possibly could, and it just gives them that much more information. I mean, going back just to that plate that was created looking out in the junkyard, I mean, that was like complete wizardry that these guys went ahead and made that, because when you scrub through all the little pieces that we used and how they went ahead and reconfigured the cars and building this plate, I mean, it was
We didn't
insane.
have that plate.
We didn't have that plate. It was literally going to the end of takes, scrolling, finding little pieces where like, oh, this car in the back is in focus here. Okay, well, we're going to use this. And then we go to another take and, okay, well, the blue trailer on the left, it's in focus here. And they just went through and like literally cut out little pieces and created this thing. And I mean, it just out of nothing.
Yeah, and then we did in After Effects, we did the 2.5D comps with the grate in the front and with the camera move. And actually in this one here also like a sense of moving forward, because Steve is walking forward. And they were so good, the duffers really loved them. So we decided, okay, hydraulics, just give us this solid plate without any camera move or anything. Just get the smoke in there and the dogs, and then we'll run it through the same After Effects script to get our cameras. And this way we could adjust it. So these are not that's not the final version of the shot. This is essentially an element that is comped over the stationary Photoshop still plate, and then grained and turned into an actual moving shot in another step.
It's really a tribute to the skills that the guys have, where it's almost like someone looking at that, you're taking it for granted that that's something that was shot, and the director's nightmare is coming back and not having coverage, finding out from editorial that you don't have the shot. And I just think it's amazing that there are two sides of it in the relationship. You're pre-planning a lot of things to make sure the directors get the coverage, but there are situations where, for whatever reason, they don't necessarily have it, and then you go even the extra mile of fabricating out of whole cloth these shots that never existed. So,
I mean, that's a lot of our history, like what we do in the old days when I was work with Robert Stromberg and stuff. Like what we did, a lot of what we did was always providing editorial with the material that somehow didn't exist. Just like if we need this big shot, we have this big moment, it doesn't exist, was never shot. Can you make that? And that's kind of where we come from. So
that's the fun. Paul and I had many discussions over this in the parking lot. when taking a break, talking about how much we both loved compositing, and it'd be like, you know, making something from nothing. That, you know, there's that magic when you take a couple of, you know, you just take a plate and it's like a puzzle. It's, you know, I mean, and that's, to me, that's half the fun. It's like, here's what we need, this is the final picture, and we're only giving you this. And so you have to kind of dope out, all right, how am I going to make this into a shot? And that's really the juice. I mean, that's the fun.
Should we move on to the closing shot?
Closing shot.
Yeah.
Okay, so the closing shot, like in the script, it says like we turn into the upside down, and we figured, well, what if we take this literal and we just do literally kind of like we just go through the ground, we make like an airplane roll backwards through the ground, and we find the upside down world literally upside down below us. And then I asked Michael to build this up so we can present it to the duffers. So you want to say something about that?
I was hoping this could be the final shot, actually, the way we used it here. No, that's a joke. We were just basically putting something together so we could plan out the camera movement. So again, this is a kind of a previs, simple previs in Cinema 4D, where I took this school and measured it out. And so we had a plan of how the camera would travel through the ground. And that was pretty much directed by Paul and how he wanted the camera to move and where we wanted to end up on the mind flare.
Yeah. There's something really interesting. Like we did a lot of let's just keep running it for a second. So we did a lot of shots with like reflections, and like the thing is when you have a reflection, it's really like the inverse left right. It's kind of like this here. You have two fingers, you have two hands, they're reflecting each other, right? So the difference is left and right is swapped in the reflection. So we knew that's how we're going to have to tackle this and shoot basically one half of this shot reversed. And for the camera department, we put that little cross in there, so it's not by chance that this cross is walking. It's going exactly down the side of the door until it hits the ground with a constant speed, and it comes back out the other side. So that's basically, this is what we're going to. It's the easiest way how we can do this. This is a way we can explain to the camera operator. Just give us a really smooth roll and try to maintain the speed as best you can and keep rolling until you get to the ground, and you should be at the ground or just above the ground with the camera at 90 degrees. That was basically the plan. And then just to be safe, we made an animation to show that how this is done.
The way this comes to you, the way your mind works, it's a pretty simple thing, but
yeah, it's really simple. Like, see right there.
Explain it to someone else. I think this was important.
So here, we did this for the camera department. You see the school, the layout, and you see there's basically two crane moves, and there's a reset in between the two. Can you show that again? And basically, the A camera is shooting correctly, and the B camera is flopped, or vice versa. One of them has to be flopped in post in order for that to work. They have to have the same rotational speed in the opposite direction, and they have to follow the same axis. So technically, in that moment where these two cameras touch each other, you would have a frame that you can tie together where both buildings look exactly like a reflection of each other, right?
Much more difficult.
Yeah, and so
it's like such a mind twister.
No, it is actually really simple, but it's really hard to communicate, and it turned out on the day that because it was, of course, scheduled last thing, it was really hard. It was actually really hard to do. And
they were like, "You want to do what?"
Yeah, they were tired. Like everybody was done. This is like the end of the show. Like everybody was like fried, and it's like, no, okay. So yeah, that's what I want to do. It's just really simple. We lined up. We put marks there, so we knew we could recreate that end of the A crane and then make it part of the B crane. It turns out the A side was much harder to shoot. So we have a few examples of the takes from the A camera, from the A side. B side was a charm, was really easy. Okay, this is basically all the takes color coded, and blue means usable, and everything green means maybe usable, and everything that's not green or blue is not usable. So there's a few versions of going through this thing, and those are the green and blue ones, and yeah. So then it became about proving that this quite, at some point we felt like, okay, we got what we need, we can get the rest of the way by stabilizing this camera in post, like something we do all the time. We project through the camera and then make a clean camera that looks at the projected image, kind of similar to what we've seen in that Photoshop file before. And so the next one would be a test, like the first thing I did when I came back from Atlanta was like, make sure we have that shot. It's doable. So we have this first test here. That's basically, and we decided we're actually going to go the distance, and we're going to flop the beginning of the shot and recreate all the graphics on the building, because the water tower is on the right side at the end of the shot when it really matters. So this is a little harder than doing it the other way around, but we felt it gives us a better result, and we also go through the door that is played in the whole scene. So this is basically the proof of concept. This works, that this is going to work, and you can see actually in the next file, you can see the moment of, if you just open it and not move, just hit it, you see this is the handoff between the two plates, and you can see it's like a perfect reflection, but they're from two different cameras and from two different takes and just lined up on top of each other. And here you see like the cheat only works for just a little moment. It just works, it just holds up for like a few frames, just enough to get the ground wiped through the shot and go from the first shot to the second shot.
So shall we see the shot?
Yeah, let's do
okay.
it. You want to show the corner pin thing, Paul?
Yeah, we can do that really quickly. This is basically, there's 3 channels. The blue channel has the shot, and the green and red channel have like basically corner pin patterns that you can apply to your plate, and then without even using a camera or something, you can have the same compensation, get to the exact same result, which is what we gave to the vendor to make sure that they can, and you see like kind of like the compensation moves that are performed to make these plates really roll at the same time.
They can track off of that, and you've done all the prep work on it.
Yes.
And it compensates for everything.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. And then there's the final shot.
Yeah.
So we had to put in the kids, of course, on the inside, and all of the Hawkins Middle School stuff and the snowball and all that is flopped to the other side. Also, the license plates of the cars are flopped back, so they look right.
Those are full CG stars as well.
Amazing.
And with Matt and with Michael, we did quite a few layouts for where the Shadow Man is, how he moves, when the lightning bolts strike, and what sort of intensity of light they have.
Yeah, the big thing was getting the music timing just right, and when those bolts were going to hit. And the deafers were very specific of when they wanted those moments to hit, so we had to communicate that to the vendors, and it all went extremely well.
It's just amazing and thank you so much for showing us what goes into a shot like that, because you're watching it at the end and you're realizing the show is coming to an end for the season. It's the full setup. It says so much is going on just plot-wise in that shot, and it's just really a tribute to how you guys tackle a problem and then execute on it. So we have a couple minutes left. If there's anything that you guys want to mention or go through, now would be it, or otherwise, I will thank you for an amazing panel, and thank you so much for coming out.
It was fun.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. It was a great show.
Well done, Team Stranger Things. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
So, good.